Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into my 2023 college football way too early schedule look-ahead series where I take a look at 3 different schedules, kind of map them out, and go through how easy or how hard I expect them to be for the upcoming college football season. Today we're looking at North Carolina, Michigan State, and Utah. So some very different teams from different conferences, starting with North Carolina. And the general vibe with UNC next year is it's pretty much Drake May and no one else. They've had a very bad defense. It does not look like that's really going to be improving a ton. I would expect it to at least get a little bit better. But they also lose Josh Downs, the star receiver. Their offense might get a tad worse, even with Drake May getting older. Drake May kind of, mid-season entered the Heisman race, and then UNC went on that 4-game losing streak at the end of the year. Looking at their 2023 schedule, they get South Carolina on a neutral field, the Carolina Panthers home stadium. That will be the opening Saturday, probably a Saturday afternoon or Saturday night game, I would say. It's an okay non-conference game, North Carolina versus South Carolina. It's winnable. I mean, you've got Drake May, but you are facing Spencer Rattler, who is returning for South Carolina. They get Appalachian State at home, very winnable. I know a lot of people like Appalachian State. They had that big upset win against A&M last year, but Appalachian State was actually really bad. They didn't even make a bowl. I believe they were 5-7. And then week 3, how about Minnesota? So North Carolina, kind of a hard non-conference schedule. They do get Minnesota at home, and Minnesota will be losing a lot and breaking in a new quarterback, so it's winnable. And I would really... I think that's actually a very good game for North Carolina because it's not like Minnesota's this terrible team. It's probably going to help your strength of schedule, certainly your non-conference strength of schedule, and you'll probably get a win. You have Drake May. They're starting some, new quarterback. And then the other non-conference game is Campbell. That is a free win for North Carolina. That game is way later in the season because none of the other conference games have a schedule yet. Someone said that the schedule for the non-conference or the schedule for the conference games for the ACC comes out on the 31st of January. Looking at their conference schedule, at Georgia Tech, it's winnable. At UNC, North Carolina at NC State, that's a tough game, but without Devin Leary, you've got to figure it's winnable. You get Duke at home, you got to win that game if you're UNC, that's the rivalry game. Miami at home, it's winnable. Syracuse at home is winnable. Virginia at home is winnable. That's a very, very favorable home slate for North Carolina. And then at Clemson, that's always going to be tough. Clemson should have a much improved offense with the new offensive coordinator, with the young quarterback getting more experience, but they will drop off a bit on defense due to their recruiting coming down a little bit over the past few years. And then at Pittsburgh, I'm really not high on Pittsburgh in 2023. I think that game is winnable. So a real easy home schedule for North Carolina. You get Appalachian State at home, Minnesota at home, Campbell at home, Duke, Miami, Syracuse, Virginia. Those are all very manageable games. It just comes down to North Carolina really needing to attack the transfer portal, I think, in the spring window when the portal opens up again, and really maybe getting a star wide receiver. You'd figure they would be able to attract one. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the nation in Drake May. That could be very critical. This is the first time I'm seeing North Carolina's schedule, and I like the way it sets up. You get to dodge FSU. The real only uphill battle is at Clemson and then maybe at Pittsburgh and NC State, but a lot of stuff manageable on this schedule. Week 1 is so important. That is a pick'em game. That is a toss-up against South Carolina. If you're North Carolina, that's a game you would love to have. You beat Appalachian State, you beat Minnesota, and now you begin conference play 3-0 with 2 quality Power 5 wins if they're able to do that. Next, taking a look at Michigan State. So, Michigan State, I believe Peyton Thorne is returning for his 20th season. You know what? Actually, A lot of Michigan State fans don't even want him to start. So we'll see who ends up winning that job. But with Mel Tucker, I mean, at some point, the pass defense has to improve. I will say, Mel Tucker does a good job in the portal. They've gotten more talented players recently, but last year it was a major step back. We all know that. They begin with Central Michigan, and I do have to say I am a little disappointed that this game is not on a Friday. Normally, Michigan State always begins with a MAC team on a Friday. It's on Saturday. Then they get Richmond at home, so that should be 2 free wins. That is a huge Week 3 game versus Washington. Washington has a lot of hype surrounding them, but Michigan State gets them at home. It is so critical to go into that game 2-0 with momentum. Whoever your starting quarterback is, that's a good Washington team who will possibly be a top 10 team in the AP poll. And it's huge for the Big Ten. It's huge for Michigan State to try and get an upset win. That Washington team is beatable. They do not have a good pass defense. Maryland at home, Week 4. It's winnable. At Iowa, I think that's a loss if you're MSU personally. They get an early season bye week. Then they're at Rutgers. That's a game you got to win. They get Michigan at home. Honestly, I think that's an underrated rivalry. Those two teams just hate each other. I know people talk about it being a rivalry, but I mean, legitimately, Michigan and Michigan State just hate each other. You get them at home. We remember 2 years ago with Kenneth Walker. Little bit in flux right now with Michigan. Will they get Harbaugh back? If they do, it's going to be a very uphill battle for MSU, even with that game being at home with Blake Corum returning to Michigan. At Minnesota, it's winnable. We talked about Minnesota breaking in a new quarterback, losing their top running back. Nebraska at home, that's winnable. At Ohio State late in the season, that is brutal. You would say it's a loss. At Indiana, that's a game you've got to win. And then Penn State at home, that is brutal. So that's a tough close to the season. If you're Michigan State, at this point, I would say let's build on the transfer portal recruiting. Let's build on the overall success we've had recruiting in general. They've brought in some better players with Mel Tucker, but it's very important that MSU gets back up at least to 8 wins, and it would be huge if they won that Week 3 non-conference game against Washington. At Iowa is an uphill battle. Versus Michigan is rough. At Ohio State is brutal, and versus Penn State, I would say those would probably be your 4 losses. Maybe you get lucky and win on the road in Iowa, but I would not expect it. And then every other game, possibly another loss to Washington, that takes you to 7-5. You struggle with Minnesota, now you're 6-6. That's how things start to spiral for MSU. And then Utah. The final team we're looking at, Utah is just such a solid football program. They are losing their number 1 cornerback, Clark Phillips III, and their top tight end, but they do return Cam Rising. Week 1, they're trying to get some payback versus Florida, and I really like them to win that game at home. Florida breaking in a new quarterback. That atmosphere should be amazing in the opening weekend. How about Week 2 at Baylor? That is not an easy game. Baylor got a pretty good transfer quarterback from Mississippi State. I have a lot of respect for Baylor football. Those are 2 rough games for Utah non-conference. They get Weber State Week 3, the FCS program. There's your first free win. And then all of the other games, the overall dates will be announced later. At Arizona, that's a game Utah always wins. At Oregon State, I would favor Utah. At USC, that's tough. Arizona State at home, that's a win. California at home, that's a win. Colorado, I know they've gotten hype and stuff like that, but I would certainly favor Utah over Colorado. Oregon at home, that's going to be a make-or-break game for Utah. Oregon, we know, is going to be really good with Bo Nix back and the investments they've made on the defensive side of the football in the transfer portal. You get UCLA at home. I would say Utah's going to win that game right now based off the fact that UCLA loses DTR and might be starting a true freshman or a transfer portal QB. And then at Washington, that's a brutal one. So overall for Utah, Again, it starts with week 1. The exact same thing last year. They lost week 1, and that ruined their season. They were not in the national. It's pretty crazy considering they won the Pac-12, but they were super irrelevant because they lost that week 1 game. It's so important. You beat Florida at home. You should be the favorite. Florida doesn't have Anthony Richardson anymore. And then I'll tell you, that is brutal. Week 1 versus Florida at Baylor week 2. I mean, beating Baylor, certainly. I know Baylor had a bad year. They were 6-7, but they are no slouch. Those are 2 rough games to start the season. You get a cream puff week 3, but that's a tough non-conference schedule. From the teams I've seen, that is a tough non-conference schedule with 2 legitimate Power 5 teams. And then taking a look at a smaller school, this is UMass, the worst team normally every single year in FBS. So UMass, they are an independent. They start at New Mexico State. I'm just going to try and find wins for UMass. New Mexico State, I believe they're actually not bad. No, they're still really bad. But New Mexico State did go 7-6 last year. They beat Bowling Green in a bowl game at Auburn week 2. That's a loss. They get Miami of Ohio at home. Maybe they win that game. At Eastern, they just play a lot of weird games. At Eastern Michigan, they get New Mexico at home. That's winnable. You get Toledo at home, probably a loss. You get Arkansas State at home. This is a horrible schedule. Arkansas State at home. At Penn State, randomly in the middle of the season. They'll be facing the whiteout, I'm sure. They make that the 7:30 ABC whiteout game. At Army, that's a loss. Merrimack, Merrimack's a Division I college basketball team. I don't even know where Merrimack is. You got to win that game. You got to beat Merrimack. At Liberty, I believe Liberty is another independent they always face. That'll be a loss. And then they get UConn at home, maybe winnable, although UConn has kind of turned their program around at least a little bit. So guys, looking at all these schedules, I would say I really like how it aligns for North Carolina in the ACC. Their home schedule is very manageable. Michigan State, it's tough because you got Washington in the non-conference and you are in the Big Ten East. You've got brutal games with Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. At Iowa isn't easy, especially with Iowa getting better on offense. And then that Utah non-conference, those first 2 games, Florida and at Baylor, very, very important. And we know the Pac-12 is returning so many quarterbacks. That's what I always stress. You've got USC on the road returning the Heisman Trophy winner. You've got Oregon at home returning Bo Nix, who's a Heisman Trophy hopeful. At Washington, they are returning the leading passer in 2022. So that is not an easy schedule at all for Utah when you combine the 2 Power 5 non-conference teams with all of the tough teams in the Pac-12 next year due to the returning quarterbacks. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.